My name is Ulrika Mårtensson and I work at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, which is located in the city of Trondheim, marked out on the map here. I teach religious studies and especially Islam and Middle East religions, and my research focuses on Islamic historiography, the Qur'an and its exegesis or tafsir, but also natural law theory and its relationship to constitution and social contract, and also to law and language. The paper I would have presented in this panel is entitled "The Qur'an as a Theory of Natural Law and Natural Rights, viewed through the lens of Al-Tabari and some other medieval exegetes." And the thesis I'm presenting in this paper is that in the science of fiqh or jurisprudence, the Qur'an serves, as is well known, as the first source of the law. But I'm then also arguing that it has this function as the first source of law because it is also functioning as a theory of natural law and natural rights. And I will be relying on specific concepts and sources to develop this argument. First of all, I'll be using definitions of natural law theory by Anver Emon for the Islamic context and John Finnis for more general definitions. And then I'll be using early and medieval exegetes and their interpretations of the Qur'an. And finally, I will have a quick look at the concept haqq in the Qur'an itself. There is no consensus among researchers whether there is actually such a thing as natural law theory in Islamic law. I won't have time to go into the debate, but I will be following Anver Emon's work because he is one of those who has argued that Muslim jurists from the early periods, actually from at least the 700s onwards, were in fact operating with a natural law theory when they were deriving new laws from the Qur'an and the Hadith. And in particular, he has looked at a hermeneutical method that the jurists used. So he shows how they referred to divine creation as a site where fact and value are fused. The hermeneutical method of referring to creation as a site where fact and value are fused is illustrated here in this slide through the jurist At-Tabari, who died in 310 or 923. Tabari founded his own school of law, Al-Madhab al-Jariri, in Baghdad during the Abbasid Caliphate. And here we can see his exegesis of one of the several Quranic creation verses, specifically verse 1 of Surah 4, entitled An-Nisa, or Women. So the verse itself reads, "O people, fulfill your obligations towards your Lord, who created you by dividing one person and thereby distinguishing from it its other half." Tabari then explains, God means by his speech, "O people, fulfill your obligations," etc. He says, he described himself as the one who has divided up all the diverse beings from one individual to let his servants know how he issued forth all that from one person. Thus he informs them that since they are all offspring of one man and one mother, and are therefore all from one another, they are obliged to uphold each other's rights as brothers. They are made to act kindly, not oppressively, towards each other, so that the strong uphold the rights of the weak in accordance with what God has commanded them. Now, if we refer back to Emon's argument that creation serves as a site where fact and value are fused, then we can see that the fact in this context refers to God having created all humans from one person, which is actually Adam. It surfaces later on. So, in fact, the humans constitute one universal brotherhood, and the corresponding value is that God obligates them to uphold each other's rights and not oppress each other. And especially then the strong are commanded by God to uphold the rights of the weak. For comparison, I have used the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948. Though this declaration, of course, does not refer to divine creation, it uses very similar images to those that Abari conjured up of a universal human family. So the preamble of the EuARe reads, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice and peace in the world. Whereas it is essential, if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law. Article 1. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. So, the fact in this case is Article 1's statement that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. This is a fact. The corresponding value is that human rights should be protected against oppression through the rule of law, and that they should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. So in both these cases then, either through divine creation or simply by virtue of being born, all humans have inherent rights, although obviously the substantive rights differ from Abari's context to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The theoretical framework is quite similar, I would argue. Abari's Madhab Jariri, or his Jariri school of law, did not last more than a generation after his death. But other jurists after him interpreted verse 1 of Surah 4 in the same way as he did, as a foundation for human rights. Here I have selected representatives of 12er Shia and the two main Sunni theological schools, the Mu'tazila and the Ash'ariya. So we have a Tusi representing 12er Shia and the Ja'fari Madhab, or school of law. We have a Zamakhshari, who's Sunni and belonged to the Mu'tazili theological school. Al-Razi, Sunni and Ash'ari theologian and jurist, also of the Shafi'i school. And then finally Al-Suyuti, who's a Sunni, also of the Ash'ari theological school and the Shafi'i school of law. Now, as we can see here, Ar-Razi even points out that all of Surah 4 is about weak groups and their members' rights. So he actually explicitly connects the first verse, which is about creation, with the rest of the legal rights that are treated in this surah. The term that the jurists in the previous slide use for rights is Arabic hukuk, singular haq. In the second half of the paper, I will proceed to argue that the jurists interpreted Surah 4 verse 1 as a foundation for human rights because of the Quran's own concept, al-haq. So, al-haq is mostly rendered in English translations as the truth, but it also refers to right. I will rely on John Finnis's work and his argument that natural law theory, which includes the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, he argues, requires a claim to absolute truth for the legal values in case. So, in other words, the values that underpin rights must be held absolutely true. They are not relative to particular circumstances or times, but they are absolutely true in this sense. So I therefore propose that al-haq in the Quran means true right, in the sense that God grants all humans rights, which correspond then to values that are absolutely true, because God demonstrates and proves their truth throughout the Quran and its universal history of prophets and messengers. And I will pick examples from Surah 69, Al-Haqqa, Surah 7, Al-A'raf, and Surah 4 again, An-Nisa, to support this thesis. In a nutshell, that the Quran served as the first source of the law because it established the facts and values that constituted as a theory of natural law and natural rights. In other words, it is not only the jurists of the medieval times that read natural law theory into the Quran, but I would argue that the Quran itself reflects natural law theory. So this is what I will be arguing in this paper with much more concrete examples, hopefully. Thank you so much for the opportunity.